Hello and welcome to EnergyNext 2022. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. My name is Matt Stubbs. I'm the founder of Profigi. We provide software and services to make the operation and management of renewable energy assets more effective, efficient, and profitable. My background is in managing complex digital transformation across a wide range of industries, including resources, utilities, telco, financial services, and government. Today, we'll discuss best practices in asset management for renewable energy. I'll focus on solar and storage, but these principles apply to other assets as well. Along the way, we'll discuss digitisation and how this is central to effective asset management. Firstly, a little bit about us. Our team brings many years of experience implementing and managing digital transformation. We're independent. We work with vendors, but we're not wedded to a single vendor. We recognise that some of the biggest opportunities are in solving problems, not in plugging products. So, if you're battling to manage your operations with Excel and email, think of us. Just a little bit about the asset base. This chart will look familiar to most of you. This is the Clean Energy Australia report from 2022, showing the annual installed capacity for solar. As you can see, it's increasing every year and it will continue to increase for the foreseeable future. So what I see when I look at this chart is assets that are going to age. As assets age, we can expect to see reliability and performance issues to emerge. Specific to this industry though, increased energy density of wind and solar assets also impacts on reliability. For example, higher capacity inverters for wind or high capacity cells for solar PV may not be as reliable out of the box as they were in the past. So how do we make sure they continue to be productive over their lifetime? How do we make good decisions about maintenance and their replacement? It's a big challenge, but the good news is that the systems we need to do that effectively already exist. The global standard for asset management is ISO 55001, represented here. This system is used across industries and addresses all aspects of critical assets end to end. It includes processes, but it also includes real-world compliance and culture. The focus of asset management is on maximising the productivity of the asset over time, aligned to the needs and priorities of the business. Large-scale investors require systems like this to be in place to protect their investment. And even though this is an industry that's reactive, it's important to apply these systems to be as proactive as possible. More specific to renewables, here's the life cycle for asset management for renewable energy. This is from the Solar Power Europe Operation and Maintenance Best Practice Guide. This provides a framework for managing renewables. And as you can see, the roles and responsibilities for asset management evolve over time, along with the priorities and focus for management of the asset. Planning for the entire life cycle really needs to commence as early as possible. So thinking about the possibly 30-year life of the asset needs to really happen up front and continue throughout. Alongside that, risk management needs to start early and continue throughout the life cycle as well. So what about the asset manager? It's a challenging role. They need to be a generalist, but they also need to be able to understand all aspects of the asset operation. And that includes things like contracts, stakeholders, issues, and risks. And as you can see on the chart, there are many stakeholders and many concerns to juggle. So some of the key issues that the asset manager needs to contend with include workplace health and safety, without which you are not able to operate, the grid, without which you're not able to export, and in particular anticipating and managing issues that could impact on predictable generation, things like technical issues such as equipment breakdown and underperformance, compliance, which is outside of the control of the asset owner but can impact on financial performance, and in Australia things like environmental factors such as fires, floods, and cyclones. managing profit and loss for renewable energy assets is a key element of the asset manager's role. They're responsible for managing to a budget. And as you can see from this example, which is from a client solar plant over a 12-month period, that has some interesting attributes. The revenue tends to be seasonal. So there's a budget for the export in this case, generating revenue over a 12-month period. The costs, on the other hand, tend to be relatively fixed, but they can also be lumpy. So again, we need to have a budget in place for managing those. The role of the asset manager is to manage that over the longer term, monthly or yearly. So this data is going to be really important to us. As mentioned, managing renewable energy assets is a pretty reactive business. But nevertheless, in best practice asset management, we want to strive to be proactive. And so therefore, we want to have continual improvement processes supported by consistent and appropriate data sets. So the life cycle, as you see here, is very much like that plan, do, check, act cycle in traditional quality management. So the opportunity also with that baseline data under control is to be able to do predictive analytics to identify issues, to improve and optimize the performance of the assets, and actually be predictive and prevent and avoid asset issues before they occur. So what are the KPIs for renewables? These are the recommended best practice KPIs. So the yellow ones are the minimum requirement, and the other ones are best practice or recommended requirements. So we'll look a little bit further on these in the dashboards, but some of the key elements are the active and reactive energy produced by the plant, the availability of the system, and the so-called performance ratio of the system. These are measured against irradiation. It's a really important baseline measure for us. Also, things like incidents, impacts, physical and cyber issues, and most importantly, the effectiveness of the O&M contractor are all things that you want to have good KPIs and good real-time data or operational data to make sure that they're performing well. So here's an example dashboard. This one's from Actus ERP, being fed from various different appliances, including the inverter, on-site pyranometer, satellite data, and so on. So this is effectively live data that's been fed into a dashboard that shows the current operational status. This example's from Hybrid Energy, quite similar, but we start to see other elements. This one shows energy balance, energy allocation, battery degradation, so they've included batteries, run times, and so on. This one shows the base case that we were talking about. So the chart in front shows the actual production versus the expected energy production, which is the budget expressed in kilowatts, basically. This report is probably the most important for the asset manager. This is the plant monthly report. This one's from Actus ERP. This system provides a consolidated view from all of those sources, so the operational sources, but also incidents, qualitative narrative from the asset manager. It shows the performance ratio and other KPIs on a single report. So in putting these reports together, it's really important to make sure that they're aligned to the needs of the stakeholders. The asset manager should define that with each stakeholder based on their needs and provide that consistently over time. That way it builds confidence in the stakeholders that management is effective and trustworthy over the life of the asset. Another really important data source is testing and observation data. That's important at different stages of the asset life cycle. During commissioning, we want to be able to verify the safety and quality of the constructed asset. During operation, we want to be able to optimize the asset, such as through an annual performance review, do underperformance diagnosis, and deal with operational and insurance issues, such as damage from natural disasters. One really important data source for the asset manager is IV curve testing. As we were talking about, this is used at the commissioning of the plant to determine the performance of the solar cells. It can also be done later in the cycles against the same cells and the same data sets to determine deterioration of the cells and the ongoing performance and issues. Thermography has emerged as an important technology for managing the performance of the asset over time. Similar to the IV curve testing, this can be done at commissioning and through operation, and it enables the detection of so-called hotspots. These can be an indicator of failures. The ability now to use those data sets using AI means that the more and more operation and maintenance specialists and the asset managers can be more predictive about where issues are going to emerge. Here's an example from Exanta where there's automation of the drone navigation through the plant and mapping that together into the system, again making it much less labour intensive and more efficient. I'll just touch briefly on some other important data sources that need to be consolidated into reporting for assets. One of those is weather. This example is from Solcast. Again, automation's helping us here because organisations like Solcast and Solar GIS are able to provide that irradiance both predictive and actual based on satellite data. Again, that helps the asset managers to do that at scale. It's not quite as accurate as the perinometer that we were talking about before, but it's a really, really powerful and useful tool, again, that can be run at scale. It can work at different sites and can calculate based on the orientation of the panels and so on. So it can be refined to make quite accurate and quite useful in the operation. Of course, there's market data. So understanding what's going on in the grid is more and more important, be that when prices are going to be high or even when prices are going to be negative and we want to not generate during those times. Other information which is maybe not quite as exciting but very important is documentation and record keeping. That builds up over the life of the asset. So as you can see in the early life cycles, you have things like permits and designs, and then we have that operational data that we've been talking about through the life cycle. This needs to be retained, could be for compliance, also for just providing effective operation to support some of those management processes. It's really important to keep that in a consolidated way. And so even a simple record platform can help, but a consolidated platform that associates the records to the assets themselves is even more valuable. So to the major theme of my talk today, data integration is key. Every client has a different environment, different sizes, different types. As you can see here, there are many, many different data sources that are relevant to asset management. The point of the asset management system is to provide that consolidated view. So to support the consolidated view, it's important to consolidate the data. As you can see here, many different types of systems, ranging from weather that we talked about, asset management systems, financial systems, maintenance and management systems, monitoring and control, etc. Possibly you could have a consolidated asset management system, such as some of the ones you see on the left-hand side. But more often than not, asset managers in Australia have some of these systems already, and they're managing that sort of grey space in between using Excel spreadsheets and so on. So part of the challenge is to provide a consolidated data set. So we can do that either, as I said, through system consolidation or through data consolidation. And that data aggregation, the more efficiently we can do that, the more able the asset manager is to get that single view of the asset, to understand a more holistic view like we saw in the monthly report, and to manage performance over time and build confidence in the stakeholders. So how do we do that? Here's an outline of our methodology. Again, my background is in project management, so I look on any technical challenge probably from a project or program perspective. When we're talking about continual improvement before, that's an iterative cycle. Well, so's the implementation. So our approach is to firstly establish the platforms and systems that are needed, but in terms of implementing solutions, we want to do that iteratively. So we want to align with what are the business priorities, determine what those priorities are, and define releases around those priorities, and then deliver those iteratively, validate them with the business, confirm that they're working, and then take learnings from that and bring those into the next cycle, and so on. This way we can deliver value early and iteratively for the asset manager over the life of the asset. So to bring together some of these ideas, let's have a look at a real-world example. What you can see in front of you is two charts of one plant on one building on 2 different days. As you can see, these charts show the kilowatts output over the day. The charts aren't all that different. What you can see in both charts is that in early afternoon, the output drops off at around about the same time. So what's going on? In the first case, we can see that the weather is fine, there's plenty of sunshine, the inverters are working just fine. However, in the early afternoon, the system is export limited. So here's an issue that, apart from dealing with those constraints of the grid, there's really not a lot that the operation and maintenance provider can do. However, it is a concern, and it's something that the asset manager needs to be aware of. But of course, that's not the whole story. As we were saying before, it's a busy job and there's lots of issues to deal with. In this particular plant, there was, as you can see in the photograph, water ingress into one of the inverters. This led to a trip of the device, and what you can see is a combination of residue and corrosion, which is clearly a concern for the operation and maintenance provider, and obviously also for the asset manager. So what did that do to the performance? Here we can see on the equivalent chart on this day, we weren't export limited, but we actually did have that failure of the inverter, probably also a different irradiance profile, so the sunshine is also a factor. So, but even though the overall profile looks somewhat similar, within that data there's quite a different set of issues. So how does that look over time? So as we were saying before, it's really important to be able to understand that performance, not just on a real-time basis or day by day, but really over the month, over the year. And so reports like this start to build up that picture for the asset manager to understand what are the different issues at play. And in this chart, you can see in context what's happening with this particular inverter in this particular plant. With that, I'd like to say thanks to all the people that provided input and feedback on this presentation. Konstantinos from Electris, Siggy from Wursol, Andrew from Exanta, Ben from Hybrid Energy, Greg and Michael from Insight Energy, and Julian from Solstice AI. So again, apologies I couldn't be there today. It'll be great to continue the conversation, so please don't hesitate to contact me at the contacts that you see here. and we'd be really happy to talk to you about any of these challenges and how we could help. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the conference.